Hi, I'm Abby. Here at Weidmann Whiteley, health, safety and the environment are our #1 priority. We want you to be safe whilst here on site, so please watch this video carefully.
When you first arrive on site, please observe our speed limit of 10 miles per hour. Your first port of call should be our office block reception at the top of the drive. You'll be expected to have already completed your RAMS documentation and submitted it to your sponsor or point of contact here at Weidmann Whiteley well before your visit. It's unlikely you'll be able to complete any work here unless your RAMS are suitable and sufficient for the work you've come to do. In addition to your RAMS being a legal requirement, as a responsible company, we follow all legal health and safety requirements, including the Health and Safety at Work Act of 1974. As part of your requirement when working for us, we expect you to be aware of and comply with all the relevant legal requirements for the work you're here to do. On arrival, you'll need to ask for your sponsor and sign in. Please complete visitor slips and wear the badges whilst on site. When you're leaving site, please let your sponsor know, sign out and leave your badge in our reception area. We expect you to be familiar with the correct PPE for the work that you've come to do, and you won't be able to move onto any of our production areas unless you have the appropriate and correct PPE with you. Our minimum PPE requirement is a high-vis vest and safety boots or safety shoes. If you're just walking through a production area though, but not actually working there, you may wear shoes with enclosed uppers and heels no higher than 1 inch. But for many areas and work requirements, you'll need hand protection, eye protection and earplugs or ear defenders. Many specific activities will need more specialised PPE, such as a boiler suit, head protection, dust mask, chemical suit and gas level monitors. And we expect you to carry this equipment specific to your own role, inspected regularly, and that it's in date if it carries a time use limit. There's a high number of hazards here on site, so let's have a look at some of them. Many of our production areas have a high level of noise. There are signs showing where earplugs or ear defenders should be worn. We use a lot of chemicals and other hazardous substances. Some of them are corrosive and some of them are flammable. Everything carries a label saying what it is and what the risks are. Any light chemicals, that is substances of a similar nature, should be stored together. Any chemicals brought onto our site must have had a full COSH assessment before it arrives here. If you're bringing any chemicals here, it's your responsibility to make sure the COSH regulations are kept to. And if you're going to be working with any hazardous substances, it's part of your job to be familiar with the risks and what to do if you have an accident or incident involving them. It's very similar with any gases stored on site. That is, they should be stored together in cages. And if you're using oxypropane for heating and or cutting anything, the cylinders must have flashback arresters fitted when in use and non-return valves. The cylinders themselves must be stored upright and the gas lines must be in good condition. We have a lot of vehicle movements on site. Whether that's a forklift, lorry, van or car, we ask that the 10 miles per hour speed limit is observed, and when you're walking around the site that you stick to the marked footways where they're shown. It's common sense, but please keep all walkways and passageways clear of equipment, particularly cables and hoses, so we don't have any tripping or falling. Keep your work areas as clean and tidy as possible, and make sure access ways, doorways and fire exits are kept clear at all times. We have a lot of gratings on site too. These should be fixed correctly in place and replaced correctly if moved for access. In order that our waste can either be reused, recycled or classed as landfill, we have a number of clearly marked specific waste points on site, so please use the correct points. You can't bring any hazardous materials onto site without our prior approval. If you bring any products onto site which have the potential to be spilled, you must also carry and provide the necessary clean-up material. Do not allow any spills to enter any of our drains or gullies. If you do have a spill incident, you must inform your site sponsor or supervisor as soon as possible. Due to the age of some of our buildings, we have asbestos on site. We maintain an asbestos register, and any asbestos that has been disturbed has been encapsulated. However, if you discover what you think may be asbestos that has been disturbed and not encapsulated, please immediately inform your sponsor or supervisor. We use a lot of water on site. Most water is recycled, but unfortunately, where there is water, there are rats. This can present a danger of Weil's disease. There's also a risk of Legionella. This is most likely to form in stagnant water. So it's important that you follow good hygiene. Wash your hands thoroughly before handling food, eating or drinking. We have a paper manufacturing process which creates a risk of an explosive atmosphere. This process is covered by the regulations of DSEAR. This is the Dangerous Substances and Explosive Atmosphere Regulations of 2002. If you are to work in this area, you must follow these regulations and directives. If you're in any doubt, you must speak to your sponsor or supervisor before you enter this area. A lot of our machinery has a high risk of entanglement. We'll come back to lock-off and isolation later, but it's imperative that you're familiar with the risks when working with or near a lot of our equipment. In the same way, a lot of our processes use high temperatures, both HV and LV electricity, high pressure steam, low headroom, and radiation. Our general health and safety rules are never fool around, always follow safe systems of work, use and maintain protective equipment, use and store materials, equipment and tools properly. Never try to perform work that you're not qualified to do. Be aware of potential health and safety hazards and report them. Report all accidents, however minor. Know the emergency procedures. Obey all rules, signs and instructions. And finally, if you're in any doubt of anything at any time, always ask. All contractors must immediately report all incidents to their sponsor that result in injury to any person, cause damage to any of our property or machinery, leads or could lead to environmental damage or pollution. If you see or are involved in a near miss which had the potential to cause an incident or accident, please report it to your sponsor, who will raise a dangerous occurrence report. A good number of our staff are trained in first aid. If you see an accident or you have one yourself, you must immediately seek help if you're able to do so. As soon as is possible, and certainly by the end of the day, a report will need recording in our accident book. You can't smoke in any of our buildings, and of course it's illegal to do so. If you really do need to smoke, we have some designated areas around the site. Please stick to them. We will discipline you if you smoke anywhere else. If you discover a fire, immediately sound the fire alarm. Then go to your designated assembly points. These are on the main driveway that leads to reception. After assessing the situation, the emergency response team will determine whether the fire service should be called. With any fire, don't put yourself at any risk. Don't attempt to tackle the fire unless you're trained and competent to do so. Don't attempt to tackle the fire if the area is full of smoke. And finally, don't attempt to tackle the fire if you're on your own. If you hear the fire alarm, leave by the nearest fire exit, go to your designated assembly point and direct any visitors to the correct assembly point. Don't assume it's a false alarm or a test. Don't stop to collect any belongings. Don't go back into the building until you've been told it's safe to do so. The fire alarm test is every Thursday afternoon at 2:30. They sound briefly for a few seconds and are repeated several times. If you've any doubt, then evacuate. For many jobs, you'll require a permit to work at our site. This will be tied in with your RAMs and issued by engineering management or a mill superintendent. It will be physically handed to you either after signing in or on site at your work location. The permit will indicate the system to be worked upon, and it should guide you in the method or steps to be taken to make the system safe. The permit will also detail the equipment required to carry out the task. You mustn't interfere with or work upon any other system not included in the permit. Permits to work cover a range of activities. All hot work, these include metal grinding, welding and burning. All process isolations of machinery and plant. Live electrical working. Steam, compressed air, chemical lines, confined space entry. We'll cover this in more detail shortly. Excavations, Many jobs such as electrical work, chemical lines, steam, water, compressed air and hydraulic lines will require a lock-off and isolation before commencing work. All maintenance and production staff are issued with at least one lock and hasp. You can only work on electrical equipment if you're a qualified and competent electrician, and your work must be in accordance with the Electricity at Work Act of 1989 and the IEE 18th edition regulations. Before dismantling, repair, adjustment, cleaning, inspection or closing of any equipment, all sources of energy must be isolated and locked off. If more than one person is working on the same piece of equipment, machinery or plant, you must still use your own lock and hasp alongside any others covering the same lock-off and isolation. If you bring any electrical equipment onto site, it should be certified and/or meet the regulatory requirements. All portable tools must operate at no more than 110 volts and must be PAT tested annually. Cutting and grinding equipment must be maintained in accordance with the provision and use of work equipment regulations of 1998. And of course it goes without saying that all your tools and equipment should be maintained in a safe working condition. Confined spaces are high-risk areas. You must comply with Confined Spaces Regulations of 1997 in respect of working in and entry into any boiler, flue, tank or any other type of confined spaces in which any dangerous fumes or lack of oxygen is likely to exist. You'll need a permit issued by engineering management or a mill superintendent. Any oxygen monitoring tester must be located in the area to be worked in. This is used to monitor the atmosphere for 20.9% of oxygen. If the alarm is triggered, you must immediately come out of the confined space. Working at height here on our site is a regular occurrence, and we have very strict controls that must be adhered to. How long you intend to be working at a height will determine what equipment you can use. Under normal circumstances, ladders may only be used for access for short duration jobs of no more than 30 minutes. Occasionally, ladders may be the only way to access a job that will take a longer period to complete. This is rare, but in such cases as these, a full risk assessment specific to using the ladders as part of the task must be completed. Ladders must be secured at all times, both at the base and tied near the top of the ladder. Only ladders marked with the company registry number should be used. Always inspect the ladder for damage before you use it and report any to your sponsor. If you have any doubts, don't use the ladders. If you're going to be working above a 2-metre height for any extended periods, then either scaffolding or a cherry picker should be used. Cherry pickers may only be operated by authorised and trained personnel. Scaffolding contractors must hold certificates issued by the NASC and/or the CITB and/or the EITB. The scaffolding itself must be built by competent people, and it must be regularly inspected by a competent person and every 7 days by a scaffolding inspector. If you use a mobile tower, it mustn't be built higher than 1.5 times the base width, and the wheels must be locked before using the tower. We have a lot of cranes and lifting equipment on site. Our mill cranes must only be operated by approved and trained personnel. Lifting equipment such as slings and tackles should be in good order and should be inspected before use. If you're in any doubt, ask your sponsor or a supervisor. All our lifting equipment should be clearly marked with its safe working limits, or SWL for short, and this must never be exceeded. We're very proud of our wastewater systems. We extract water from the River Wharfe for use in the mill. Most of this water is returned to the river via our waste treatment plant. Regular testing shows that the water we return to the river is cleaner than the water that we extract.